All right, we're live here. We've got a jam-packed episode of Trending in the AM today. We're going to kick off the show in just a few moments with Sean Brace, Fox the Gambler, Philly influencer, great guy. Love him. Can't wait to talk gambling on the biggest gambling day of the year. Sixers win last night. Eagles, elite defense. There's so much coming up on Trending in the AM. Don't go anywhere. Show starts in 30 seconds.
Holding, gets around in front.
And Philadelphia has it.
And a very good morning, everybody, and welcome to Trending in the AM right here on DSM Media. We're live. Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. You know the drill. Like, share, retweet, follow on all social media platforms. Do me that favor. Head over to the DSM Media YouTube page. Hit the like button, the subscribe button. Turn notifications on. That way, it's the best place to get interactive with the show. If you got questions, thoughts, concerns, anything you want to talk about, head over to that YouTube page. Best place to drop your comments over there. We are jam-packed today. We got coming up in just a minute here. Special guest, my man Sean Brace. He'll be joining us, talking all things Super Bowl, gambling, anything we could think of there, and get your questions in. We'll dive into them with him. We're going to be talking about this Eagles elite defense and how that translates to this gambling conversation that I want to have with Sean Brace, and some of the odds and some of the props and some of the different things we can bet. Sixers last night, they get their win back against Orlando. We will talk about that as well later in the show. NBA trade deadline is coming up. So we'll get into all that here in a little bit. We are just waiting for the special guest here to join. I don't want to get too deep into the conversation here. He just sent me a message. He'll be on in 2 minutes. All right. So we're going to start with the defense here. So we'll get in with him in a minute. So basically, I started looking at some of these MVP odds, and I saw, obviously, Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, the favorites to win the MVP. And I'm like, yeah, that's good. Plus 120, plus 130. There's not a lot of meat on the table to win there. So I started looking at the odds, and it got me thinking. I saw down the board one Mr. Hassan Reddick at 35-1. And it got me thinking about this elite defense. It got me thinking about how the Chiefs have played this year. It got me thinking about Patrick Mahomes' ankle. And I started to wonder, can Hassan Reddick be the first guy since Von Miller, outside of wide receiver and quarterback, to win the MVP? And at 35-1, A, odds are fantastic. But B, when you look at this defense and what they do the front four and the way they rotate it and the way they get after the quarterback, kind of makes me think that Hassan Reddick could play a very major factor and role in this Super Bowl. And I know that sounds, obvious, but everyone's talking about this game being 55, 60 combined points. It's going to be a shootout. But would it surprise us if the Eagles defense comes out and rattles Patrick Mahomes, knocks him out of the game, gets after the quarterback? We've seen, obviously, we won the Super Bowl thanks to Brandon Graham's strip sack on Tom Brady. And yeah, Nick Foles won the MVP there. But there was an argument to be made that Brandon Graham was wrecking havoc in that game and could have gotten the MVP. So there is that scenario in my head where this defense can play a factor. And that's what I'm hoping for. And, you look down this Kansas City Chiefs game, season here. They have been held in check a few times. I know they're obviously a great team, and we were held in check a few times too. But you had the Colts loss early in the season, late in this season. Let's go over these games here. The Broncos, 27 points. The Seahawks held them to 24 points. They put up 30 against the Texans, but the Bengals held them to 24 points. The Rams, who were out of it by this point, held them to 26. So there's a scenario where a great defense can come into play and keep this Chiefs offense sub 30 points, sub 25 points. And the way that happens is if Hassan Reddick and that rest of that defensive line eats all day. Obviously, Hassan Reddick has a chip on his shoulder. Well, there we go. So we're gonna pause that for a second here because I'm gonna try my best to introduce this guy the best I can. It's a guy that I've been following for a long time. He has built quite many things up from the ground up. He grinds harder than anybody. He's built Philly Influencer. He's built Fox the Gambler. Now he is building Brace for Winnings. There we go. That is my man, Sean Brace. To me,
All right, there you go.
To me, the legend, Sean Brace. Sean,
Oh,
I
man.
want to say greatly appreciate you coming on this morning because you've been somebody I've been watching since day one. You know, building Philly Influencer, building Fox the Gambler, giving us a legit third alternative on the radio, and the way you do your business. It's how I idolize, not idolize. That's a wrong word there. I really respect the way you have done your business.
And thank you very much. The words mean a ton to me to hear, and you know what it is. We grind, and when it has an effect on people like that, or people think like that, then it means a ton. So I appreciate that, especially coming from you. Look, it's hasn't been easy. We made it through a pandemic. I won't lie. Like, that was obviously, we all went through it, no matter what business you're in. We really had some momentum before the pandemic. Not to say that we could compete with anybody like WIP. WIP's, been doing it for decades now, and plus they have an unlimited budget. How many people are on that morning show? I mean, I'm surprised that you and I didn't get it. There's legitimately like 13 people going to be on that morning show moving forward. God bless them. I love them all, but can I get like an eighth of that budget? Just a tiny bit of that budget. But you know how it is, man.
You have a budget. My wife won't let me spend a penny on this morning show, So, this is just in my little spare bedroom here, and there ain't no budget for this show. Zero, zilch.
Well, that's what it takes sometimes. When I did the Philly Influencer thing, I built the studio and was really lucky to put that together the way it came about. But as you can see, I used to have a studio. Now I'm just in the corner.
I was hoping to see the Joel Embiid mural still on the wall back there, man. Dude, when you rolled that out on Philly Influencer that first time, I was like, dude, I love this guy. That is the dream, to be allowed to put a mural in the wall in one of the rooms of my house,
It's still up. Hey, look, it used to be a big studio space. Now it's a corner, and literally 3 other quarters of this is my daughter. So other than that,
Well, I appreciate that. So really, you got Fox the Gambler, and you guys do great work there, and I love it. And talking gambling all the time, and the Super Bowl every single year, it's got to be great for you that your hometown Philadelphia Eagles are in the Super Bowl, and you can actually, you're not talking Patriots versus the Rams or any of these other teams. You get to talk the Eagles in the Super Bowl for the next 2 weeks, all the different bets and odds. It's got to be awesome for you to have that, right?
Yeah, it's the next step. It's the next level for us. I feel like we've done the Super Bowl conversation really well over the years. We throw a prop bowl, we do round tables, and I think that you see a lot more of that now than ever with the legalization of sports gambling. I think now we're up to 33 out of the 50 states it's legalized in, and so there's a lot more people that are doing what we were doing, say, 3 years ago. But look, I love our group. I think we got some really good opinions, personalities, voices, all of the above. And you're starting to see other guys, starting to do some other things, like Mark Drumheller's growing and doing bigger things. Tansy's doing. So it's really cool to see that, and then get to have those guys still come back and be involved. And like you said, with the Birds, it's incredible. The only thing that I'm kicking myself is I wish I could be there. I thought for a second I was going to get there. I allowed myself to be fooled into believing that I was going to be there. I knew it wasn't going to happen. I mean, those prices are just outrageous.
I'm torn on that. Would you want to be there and experience the Super Bowl, or sitting on your couch or wherever it is you sit and watch your sports games with your family and friends? You got your phone with your bets going. I mean, it's immerse yourself in the experience of the Super Bowl, or continue what you always love to do, which is be with your family and friends, gambling and doing all that stuff, which you can't do if you go to the Super Bowl. So I'm kind of torn,
This is what I want to go to. Like, I feel you. I've never been to one. I was credentialed for the one at MetLife for the Seahawks and Broncos, and I'm still kicking myself because I did not go just to see what a Super Bowl was like. But the Minnesota game happened in 2017. I had a couple friends go. I wasn't too bent out of shape about not making that because it was in Minnesota. This one's in Arizona, of course. I'm like, I'd love to be there with the warm weather. I'll tell you what, honestly, though, I swear, as I would like to do the Super Bowl and everything, But for me, and I'm sure you understand this better than most, it's all about that week leading up, the content, the nonsense, the
Absolutely.
personalities that are running around, who you can get for like 5 minutes, so on and so forth. So that's really what I wanted to do, is get down there for like Tuesday through
Mhm.
Thursday and just run, wildness for all things Radio Row. But it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. We're just going to kick butt and take names. We're already talking about doing some pep rallies and stuff like that locally,
Mhm.
some live remotes. So we're hoping that that's going to be the case. But it's going to be exciting, man. Let's go Birds and Chiefs for it all.
All right, so yesterday was the first time outside of the day when the odds were initially released, and I'm kicking myself in the ass for not getting on DraftKings quick enough to get plus 1.5 for the Eagles, which is I think what it was initially there. And the first thing I went to yesterday and I gravitated towards was right away to the MVP odds, because we've been talking the thread all week about this defense against Patrick Mahomes, the ankle of Patrick Mahomes. And obviously, Mahomes and Hurts are the favorites at MVP. And I started looking at the board and I saw that Hassan Reddick 35 to 1. And I instantly went to that. And I'm like, there's not enough value to bet Jalen Hurts to win the MVP, even though the quarterback wins most times, the MVP, wide receivers. Are there anybody that stands out to you that has a chance to win the MVP better than the Hurts and Mahomes odds?
Well, it's funny you say that. With Reddick, before the playoffs started, I just was clicking, and you get enamored with the big numbers, the zeros, and I saw the exact. There was a lot of money to be made on the Cincinnati Bengals, right from the
Okay.
beginning. It just felt like the money. If you wanted to back the Bengals, man, it was really tough to say no to place a wager on them because there was a lot more money on them. Obviously, the Bills and the Chiefs were the favorites, so. I fired on the exact matchup for Super Bowl for the Eagles over the Cincinnati Bengals. Unfortunately, Bengals came up short. That bet is no more. It was 28 to 1. And then I took a Super Bowl MVP bet because I was glancing. I saw Hassan Reddick 200 to 1. He's now down to 35 to 1. So I'm not gonna lie to you, I put $5 on Hassan Reddick,
That's a big
200
bet.
to 1. It's 1,000. It pays out over $1,000. It's $1,000 winner if he wins MVP on a $5 play. Again, we'll see what happens. Most
Yeah.
of the time, quarterbacks are the ones. But for me, I would go Reddick. I think anybody on that defensive side of the ball, because that's how they win the game, right?
Right.
Offensive lineman's not going to win the Super Bowl MVP. I would love to see Kelsey get it because that would be a great speech. But I would say from anybody on the defensive line from the Birds' perspective, and then over on the Chiefs side, it's just tough. Like I can't get behind their running backs. Tell me how Kelsey gets his touchdowns without Mahomes not throwing it to him. So is it Valdez Scantling? Like no, it's going to be Mahomes. You play that game 100 times, Mahomes is your MVP 99 out of 100, or how many times the Chiefs win it. So I'm staying away from that. I got my long shot with Hassan Reddick. If anybody's out there looking for something, absolutely anything on the defensive line. I think you have a shot with any one of those pass rushers for the Eagles. Hassan Reddick, Graham. I'd probably those two. That's what I would lock in on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, I locked in 35 to 1 as soon as I saw it yesterday. But then I started looking at it, and I love long shots. I mean, that's just what I do. I bet long shots. I've hit long shots before. And everything you just said about the defense. Well, what if Hassan Reddick, Brandon Graham, all those guys are getting after Mahomes? The ankle is not 100%. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for a James Bradbury pick six to seal the deal, or maybe two picks from Bradbury, none of the pick six. It's been since I got the MVP. It's been a long time since a defensive back has won an MVP. It was let me go back there. Dexter Jackson with Tampa Bay was the last one to win MVP. But you got Bradbury and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who are ball hawks, at 250 to 1 right now.
I don't mind it. Look, you got an angle, and I remember when Brown got it for the Cowboys against the Steelers in that game, and look, I just it's interesting because it's not always going to a quarterback, but we have that built into our minds, like, oh, it's definitely going to a quarterback. I mean, last year Cooper Kupp, so anything can happen, and if somebody like Bradbury or Slay or heck CJ does he still lead the league? He did forever, and he didn't play in 5 games. Anything's possible. So I agree with you. Defensively, I would probably go with that, but small, because at the end of the day, as we are just beating around it, probably will go to either Jalen Hurts or Mahomes.
I got Mike Powers checking in saying your Brace for Winning's new podcast saved his marriage.
What an idiot. What an idiot.
So let's dive into that. How can we save everybody's marriages by not obviously the Super Bowl is the most bet game there is. It's great. I always overextend myself as a gambler on the Super Bowl. But how do you finagle all these different prop bets, novelty bets, everything that's going on out there and not lose your mortgage for the month?
Well, and we were talking about that yesterday, just how like sports books, I apologize, I'm a little underneath the weather. Sports books make a killing, because you get people like us where it's like, oh yeah, I like that. I like this. I want this, that. You know what I say? I say, try and get yourself, those 10 bets on one sheet. So if you're getting together with a group of friends, family, sitting around, pass those around. So now you have action on that. Now you have some fun. Maybe throw $5 in the pot. Who cares? So now you at least are paying attention to that, and it satisfies that. It scratches that itch. I'm very hesitant to go balls to the wall and just wager on everything, because that's when you get beat. Like, perfect example: 49ers and Eagles. I've always felt like the Eagles were going to roll them. Bet the Eagles in the money line. Felt great about that. Didn't touch the total. I had probably three parlays mixed in, and the two had Gainwell for a touchdown. The other one had Goddard for a touchdown, and it didn't happen. So here I was looking at a pretty decent win if I just bet the Eagles money line, but because I threw those three parlays in, and two out of the three out of the four legs cashed. I just needed to touch it. You and I were talking about it. The Goddard touchdown didn't happen, and Gainwell. Boston Scott. Freaking Boston Scott again.
Well, we got my man Mark checking in here. He's saying that he thinks Boston Scott anytime touchdown Super Bowl. We're just going to keep rolling with Boston Scott. He says. I don't know. You're big on the parlays. It's actually, on a side note, it's got to be pretty awesome to log into DraftKings and see your name on one of the parlays on the top. That's when you made it right there. But we were talking about that one last week. And the thing I've started having a lot more success this year by getting away from the anytime touchdowns and going towards the team total touchdowns. If you have a good, opinion on how a game's going to play out, taking the Eagles over 3.5 or over 4.5 touchdowns is a smarter bet, in my opinion, than picking Gainwell and Goddard or whatever combination. Or do you ever gravitate towards that side of the parlays at all?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm with you all day. As far as I used for a good 3-4 weeks in the NFL season this year, I was betting team totals, and I did well until I didn't, and I'm like, and then I just got a bad taste in my mouth. But I always come back to it's one of my first tabs I click is team totals. What are the numbers? Team touchdowns. I just could not feel comfortable saying that the Eagles were going to score 4 touchdowns against the 49ers. I just felt like the 49ers were going to be that bend but don't break. Tough to beat us in the red zone. That's how explosive this offensive line is, man. I don't know how you feel about this game, but I feel really confident. I
was talking with Ed Kratz on this show yesterday. I'm like, I shouldn't be this overconfident about this game. And he said, that's pretty much the feeling of a lot of the guys that he's hanging out, all the guys on the beat, that we're way too confident, but there's a reason. Everything that we've seen up until the last couple of weeks is just a reassurance of what we've seen all year, that this is the best damn team in football.
And depending how it goes down on Sunday or next Sunday, I wish it was this Sunday. I really do. Depending how it goes down, what are we going to be talking about? If this team rolls the Kansas City Chiefs, and my coach John Jansen is already yelling at me for saying it, but let's just say roll qualifies as holding the Kansas City Chiefs under 20 points, right? And the Eagles score 30 plus like they've always been doing. We got to give the credit where it's due, man. This team has just really battled their butts off all season long, and I don't care who they go up against. They've earned that path to get the 1 seed, to be at home. They knocked the quarterback out. It's not like dude blew his hamstring out on Tuesday at practice. No, he suited up. Son Reddick came off the end and knocked him out of the game, and then Ndamukong Suh comes in and knocks out your other quarterback out of the game. Like, stop crying. This is what happens when you play football. So this offensive line, this defensive line, this offensive line is the best offensive line we've ever seen. What they're doing is just something that it blows me away. And you don't have to take my word for it. And I know you know this better than most as well. Brian Baldinger, he's a guy I go to for offensive line conversation. There's plenty of guys that are in the sports media that are breaking down offensive line that know a hell of a lot more about it than I do. And they're all saying the same thing. Wow. I mean, come on, man. You got Bosa, the defensive player of the year, being picked up, moved 9 yards off the ball, and then thrown onto the ground. And then Mulata's on top of him, like barking at him. Like, this is an unbelievable offensive line. And Jason Kelsey's leading the charge as usual.
Can you give the MVP award to the entire offensive line? If we keep Jalen, is there an odd somewhere that we can give that out? That would be great. One final betting question on this game.
It might happen.
I'm holding off on a lot of my bets. I tend to look at the initial line, every week, and this with a 2-week stretch. I missed out on the Eagles +1 or +1.5, whatever it was. I normally hold off unless something really jumps out at me. I am holding off extra long right now because I feel deep down that this line is going to sway back to the Kansas City Chiefs' favor at some point. There's going to be a lot of money, I think, at some point coming in on the Chiefs as the underdog that might get me maybe even money on the Eagles money line, maybe even money on a +1 Eagles line. How do you feel? Do you think the line will shift back in the Chiefs' favor at all?
I think that there could be a chance that money comes in on Kansas City Chiefs because I think Joe Public hasn't gotten involved just yet. I think they have to a point, but we're going to see a lot more average Joe money come in. And, of course, you're going to give them the Mahomes plus points. That's what we saw last week at home. This is a neutral site. We've never had a Super Bowl go off at a pick 'em, so that could be first. I don't see it happening that much because I still feel like the Eagles are to play, and sharp money is going to take the Philadelphia Eagles. I really do. So as far as that number is concerned, it's 1.5 at DraftKings right now. Wouldn't shock me if it dropped down to 1, but I don't see pick 'em. But again, 1 is a very nice little values play. Money line comes down as well with that. So you might be better off holding out. I do know this much though, for anybody out there and yourself included, as far as the total or anything from props to total over. As average Joes and Joe Public gets involved with this, everybody takes the overs, right? You know it. So if you feel like you like an under, which I do, I actually like the under on the score. I think it's one-sided. I think the Eagles do the scoring here. Take the under on like as closest to kick because those numbers will continue to climb because Joe Public will continue to bet the overs. So if you're on the under, you like anything on the under, hold up.
Okay. All right. I like that. I appreciate your time this morning. I know you're a busy man and all, and this is great.
Anytime,
like
anytime.
I'm honored to have you on the show this morning. Real quick before I let you go, you got the big mural of Joel Embiid next to you there. How you feeling after the last month or so about this Sixers team? Because I was really down on this team, and they're the luckiest team in sports right now because they had the Phillies going to the World Series while they were struggling, and now they're coming back, and no one's paying attention to them now because of the Eagles Super Bowl run. They're just kind of going under the radar, and nobody's focusing on our Sixers right now. How you feeling at this point?
April, because that's I'm just burned out. I think we're all like in that same type of mode with the Sixers. We just are a little burned out where it's like the same old song and dance. But this year I feel like something's different. I really do. But I've said this before. Go back to last year at this time. I was saying I feel like something's different. And if Joel Embiid doesn't get the freak injury like he normally does, this team can compete to get out of the second round, and we'll go from there. But I really do like our chances. I think this team is built tough, and for the first time in a long time, and I know Bucks just got Middleton back last week, so that changes things. But I feel like they're better than the Milwaukee Bucks. I feel like the Sixers don't have to worry about the Miami Heat. I feel like, the teams that constantly fit them, the Brooklyn Nets. I think the Sixers will beat the Brooklyn Nets. I wasn't saying that last year. This year, I feel a lot more confident about that. Boston's a tough test, of course, but this Sixers team, if they're healthy and Joel Embiid stays away from the freak injury, could happen. Get to another finals. Let's see. Can we win one? I want to win one. Union, Phillies, Eagles. I want to win one of these, please.
It's actually probably going to be the Sixers that wins one. Because every year, my little fun, biased Philly fan thing, before every season of every major team in Philly, I bet a championship future on them and one player from the team to win the MVP. I had the Phillies. I have the Eagles. I think I got the Eagles 22 or 23-1 to win the Super Bowl. I got a Hurts MVP. I had a Harper MVP. I always do that. This is the first time since the process started that I have not bet the Sixers to win the title or Joel Embiid to win the MVP. So this will be the year that it happens.
Probably. You're right. I didn't bet him MVP. I couldn't do it after the last 2 seasons. But now all of a sudden, going head to head with Joker opened up a lot of people's eyes, but who knows how that works out. They hate us. I would just like to say the Sixers continue it. And again, if they don't experience that dumbass injury, this team can compete for a championship.
Absolutely. I agree. All right. So we got Sean Brace here from Fox Again. He doesn't even need an introduction or a recap. Everybody knows what he does. I just saw you just dropped your latest Brace for Winnings, your new podcast. I'll get to listen to that later today. But again, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to let you go on this. You know, years ago when you were building up Philly Influencer, you were looking for people to join the team. I emailed you, and I'm like, "Yo, can you know? Would you be interested in bringing me on?" And you're like, you need to work a little bit harder. And you know what? You really motivated me by going out there, getting some experience, doing some work, and now I'm doing this every single day. So
yeah, man, you're doing this every morning, which is not easy. So nice work on that one, dude. Yeah, hey man, keep it cooking, and please let's do this again because this is fun, and I see you on the timeline, you're killing it, and that's what it's all about. It's all about continuing to do it and just being out there, being available, and staying with the repetitions, and knowing people know what they can get in the morning. This isn't easy, man. So tip my cap to you.
Again, they got the $18 billion budget on the dial. In the morning, I got a pen I stole from the bank when I went to make my deposit the other day. That's my budget right there.
They just hired another person for the morning show. Oh my God, Randall Cunningham is joining them every day now. Oh my goodness, Jaws, Devin, Joe, three producers. I mean, can I get a piece? Just a piece.
I don't want free pens. I want my name on a pen. That's what I want. I want my name on a pen. All right, Sean. Thank you very much for your time this morning. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, go Birds.
Go Birds, my man. That was Sean Brace, 1025 The Gambler. Great guy. I love him. Like I said, I've been following this guy. I didn't want to embarrass him on the show. Been following him since his days. He had one show. One day it lasted. They called it with John Marks. They called it the Wake and Bake Show on Saturday mornings. And then the powers that be canceled that name after one show. But I greatly appreciate his time. Again, everybody watching, make sure you click that like button, that subscribe button. If you got any questions, let me know. Hit them up, drop them in the comments section. I will get back to you all on this. We're not done here. I just want to reset for a second here. Trending in the AM on DSM Media. Get these words in here. I want to get to this question from Mark in a second. Maxey off the bench, yes or no? I am going to address that for sure. Embiid is the best player in the league. 3, absolutely agree with that as well. But to wrap up the recap of the gambling aspect of the show with Sean Brace there, yeah, that's being even 12-12. I don't know if that's really good. It's a good thing you're not betting real money on that. I really love everything that he said there. It's really interesting because I just heard somebody talking about yesterday that the line might sway to the Chiefs side a little bit, and he doesn't see it that way. And it's really good to get different perspectives. So maybe I'm just going to pay close attention to this line because I do think the Eagles win, and I want to get the best value for my money. And right now it's -1.5. Over-unders at 50.5. He thinks the under hits, which is interesting. It's close. It really is. But I'm still hoping to hold out. But maybe I won't be waiting till Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week to make that bet, to lock that in. If it starts to sway anymore in the Eagles' favor, I may have to lock it in sooner. Everything we talked about there with the defense and Hassan Reddick and what they've done, and the fact that we're even talking about there's a chance that Hassan Reddick or James Bradbury or Darius Slay could even remotely contend for an MVP award in this game just goes to show how important and how elite this Eagles defense is. And if that's the case, and if this Eagles defense is that elite, you got Patrick Mahomes, obviously with the ankle issue, 2 weeks off. He's going to do what he can to get healthier. But if they're that elite, the Eagles defense, is there a scenario where they hold the Chiefs to 20, 21 points? I mean, I'm looking at their record this year. They scored less than 20 once there, 20 there, 23, 20, 27. There's a couple times that they were held to 24 there, 24 there, 24 there. So they've been held to 24 or less points multiple times this year. They only put 23 up against the Bengals, and that was a last-second field goal that got them there. They only put up 27 against the Jags. Yeah, the Jags or the Bengals won. Obviously had to deal with the Mahomes ankle in both those games. But is there a scenario where this Eagles defense can hold Patrick Mahomes to under 24 points? And if they do, does that lead you to believe that the Eagles win this by 7, 8, 9, 10? There's a number in my head. If this Eagles defense plays to the elite level that I think they can in the Super Bowl against a very good, not good, great Chiefs team with two legends, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes is already a legend in his young age. Is there a scenario where we're looking at something, and this number just popped into my head a couple days ago, and I haven't said it out loud. This is not my official prediction. Not yet. It might end up being. I'm going to write it down just so I don't forget. My first maybe prediction of the week. 31-20. Is there a scenario if this Eagles defense plays as elite as they can and should and are? Is there a scenario where a 31-20 Eagles victory is very possible? Now, at the moment, at 50.5, the over-under, that would hit the over. So maybe we wait and hope, like he said, as Average Joe starts making bets. And, my man Josh Gamble, he used to always say when he used to be part of Fairway to Heaven, life's too short to bet the under. Well, sometimes you bet the under. Now, if that over-under gets to 52, 53, 31-20, if that's right, that could totally hit the under. And that's not a unreasonable, I'm insane kind of philosophy. I mean, hey, it could be 31-20 Chiefs too. There's definitely a scenario. I think if the Eagles win, I think it will be a cakewalk for them. So if that, by that theory, you're saying basically the Eagles win, it's because they blow out the Chiefs. But if they lose the game, it's going to be a close, hard-fought game. And that could be the way it plays out. This Eagles offense is elite. This Eagles defense is elite. But you have the experience factor and the legend factor on the Chiefs. I know their offensive weapons aren't what they used to be. It's basically just Kelce, Mahomes, and a bunch of others. But you still have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And I know you don't like him, Mark, but the great Andy Reid still. The Chiefs 49ers over-under was 55. Yeah. And that goes to what Sean Brace said right there, that typically speaking, the average money comes in and the Joe Schmo money comes in, the average, the people that bet once a year just on the Super Bowl, that money comes in and they go towards the biggest names, Patrick Mahomes. They bet the over. They bet the Chiefs because they have the reputation. That's where the money is going. That's where the average money is going to go. The smart money jumped on the Eagles when they were underdogs. Literally, it lasted for like 30 seconds. And then it swayed right away, right to the Eagles. That's where the smart money goes. And the rest of the smart money is now waiting till the average Joe money comes in and sees where the lines and the over-unders move. That's the way Dude, I know you got some deep down, demented, hatred for Andy Reid. But he's going to finally win us a Super Bowl. Yes, he is. I mean, at least he's got one Super Bowl now. He's got all the championship game appearances. He's got multiple Super Bowl appearances now. He's got his one victory. Hey, he don't need any more victories. Philly needs the victory. Philly does. So, all that being said, the betting aspect of it, I'm going to stick to this. The MVP, I just refreshed it again. It's still there. It's 35-1. I've locked in Hassan Reddick at it. You just don't get, if you're only betting $5 or $10 at a time, betting $5 on Jalen Hurts 120, so it would win you $6 on. You turn your $5 into $11. Is it really worth it? It's not. But you bet $5 on Hassan Reddick, you're winning 175. That's worth it. I still look down at this James Bradbury and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson 250-1. I still see a scenario. If you're going to throw a buck or two, 250-1. All you need is Chauncey Gardner-Johnson or James Bradbury to have one pick six to influence the game massively, sway the momentum of the game. As long as it's not a mop-up duty pick six, that's all it takes. And Patrick Mahomes is led, and he's not going to throw many pick sixes in his career. But if they're down, if we win this game 31-20, that means we're down. The Chiefs are down at some point, and they're pressing. Hassan Reddick comes off the edge, puts a little pressure on Patrick Mahomes, throws a pick at the wrong time. Bradbury runs it back. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson had 6 interceptions in like 2 games, it felt like, early this year. There's a scenario. On a side note, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the video comes out of him on the sideline crying with Nick Sirianni after we clinched the NFC Championship game. Dude, that guy's got to be brought back. With the salary cap going up, we already are under about $5 million under the cap. Then you'll have all the restructuring of contracts, people that retire if they do, people that move on, all different things. There's going to be a lot more money that Howie Roseman's going to have to maneuver this offseason to keep some of these guys, to keep a James Bradbury, to keep a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, which is going to be so important. It's going to be so important. And I love it. And I love it. So, but that's the offseason. I don't want to talk offseason yet. We're still focused on this Super Bowl here. And stay tuned because tomorrow, this week's just rolling right along. We had Ed Kratz, SI, Eagles Nation yesterday. We had Sean Brace, Fox the Gambler today. Tomorrow, returning for the third time, Brian Cameron, Philly Sports Network, joining me for a half hour to continue this Eagles talk. I mean, the Eagles talk. And then Monday, we got Josh Reynolds from Liberty Ballers join the show. We'll talk some Sixers there with him, obviously with the NBA trade deadline. I believe it's Tuesday or Wednesday next week. We'll talk that with him, but we're also going to get his Eagles coverage as well in that show. So the guests just keep rolling down the line here at Trending the AM. That's why you got to like and you got to subscribe. You got to follow us on all platforms. Turn those notifications on. You don't want to miss a minute of Trending the AM. We just talked about it with Sean Brace. Yeah, WIP, they got a $2 billion budget over there. Yeah. Well, my budget's this free pen. And these jerseys I bought from China. That's my whole budget. I don't get it. I got to hit these guys up and beg and beg and beg to get them to come on the show. And that's the only thing I've got. So let's move on to this Sixers conversation because I don't want the Sixers to fall completely out of the conversation. They beat the Orlando Magic. Hold on. I got to switch my NFL screen here to the NBA screen so I can get the box score up here. They won last night 105-94 against the Orlando Magic. Basically canceling out to an extent the loss. Audacity on the verge of being bankrupt and delisted though. Yeah, the morning show will never stop. Someone would pick it up. Whatever. Hey, you turn the dial off and you listen to this. All you got to do, you plug your phone in. If you're on your car ride to work, you plug it into the car. You hit the YouTube button. It'll play through your speakers. YouTube is playable in your car. So you listen to the great content creators that are out there. Instead of the dial, move on from that old, tired format and focus on this. Maybe someday if I get a budget bigger than this pen, maybe I'll even have a call-in feature on this show. I've got the option with this little cheap, even my soundboard. It was a $100 soundboard. Not the $1,000 soundboard. Not the Birds Beer and BS like $3,000 soundboard. Just the $100 soundboard here. But we can take phone calls. And maybe someday we'll do that. Maybe we'll start with texting into the show, and then we'll move on to the call-in. But anyway, the Sixers won last night. Recovering from that really awful loss on Monday night, which I fully blame on Mark going to the game. Obviously, he goes Monday, they lose, and then he doesn't go last night, and they win. That's obviously what it is. It was all his fault. But I don't want to dwell on the loss as much as the win or the whole big picture here with the Sixers team. First off, with that Magic team, I will say, losing to the Magic and then winning the Magic are not there yet. They're a young team, yada long. A lot of young talent on that team, for sure. Banchero, Franz Wagner, I don't know what the deal is with him. He just doesn't look like a basketball player, but the guy can knock down some shots. Had an awful shooting night last night. Wendell Carter, you got Mo Wagner, Cole Anthony, is Cole Anthony even young anymore? I don't know. I feel like he's been in the league for a long time. He's 22 still. I feel like he's been in the league for a real long time. He's got, he's got to be about in his third year in the league. It feels like he's been playing for a long time there in Orlando. And, of course, they've got Markelle Fultz, who is never going to play. Yeah, he's never going to play at this point. He's never going to play at the level that validates that number one overall pick. But I've watched both the Monday night and Wednesday night game, and I got to give Markelle Fultz credit. I wanted Markelle Fultz to work out here in Philly. He was one of my bad takes I had that I thought that was a steal, that he was going to be the best player in that draft. I know Tatum and Lonzo Ball and all those guys or whoever else went in that draft around him. I was high on Markelle Fultz. The guy has an uncanny ability to get to the basket. He's a great defender. Well, he was coming out of college, great defender and stuff like that. I loved it. And I thought he was going to be a perfect pair with Ben Simmons in that backcourt. Obviously, it didn't work out here. The injuries and whatnot with Markelle Fultz. got rid of him for a bag of baseballs, and it is what it is. Now he had the torn ACL last year, that he had to recover from. The guy's still fighting. The guy's still working on improving his game. That little hitch in his shot, it is not there anymore. You saw it last night a couple times. The ability for him, he doesn't look like he's super fast or putting out this like intense effort, but it's like he's kind of like a smaller version and the cheap version of Luka Doncic. He like lulls you to sleep and then boom, right past you to the basket. And he's got an uncanny way to find a little tiny opening and get that shot up and make those layups. And he's confident in his free throw shooting now. He's confident he takes his three-point shots when necessary. I have to give a tip of the cap. I know Sixers fans are going to hate me doing this. I'm going to give a round of applause to Markelle Fultz for sticking with it. This guy could have easily taken that first round, number one overall pick, paycheck. The injuries could have caught up to him. He just said, I'm done. But no, this guy is still out there working and fighting. And anybody that questioned his toughness and his personality and his love of the game early in his career here in Philly, I think he's showing that he does really care and he still does love the game. And I think it's great. These young guys, they come into the NBA at 19 years old, 20 years old, sometimes 18. I think Markelle Fultz was 18 on draft night, actually. Or he was one of the youngest ever, out of college in the NBA. So, these kids come in and they're expected to be superstars right away. It's the same thing with the NFL when they're drafting quarterbacks that don't belong being drafted in the first overall pick, or Zach Wilson 2 overall, didn't deserve it. But then when you get that status of draft status, then there's instant need for a return on that investment from the team and the fan base. And Fultz wasn't ready for it. And he obviously had the shoulder injury, what was it called? Thoracic syndrome or whatever it is. Yeah, if I had to choose between Simmons and Fultz, yeah. Well, it is now. Hindsight's 2020. But 2-3 years ago, were you saying that? Maybe not. Because at least Simmons was playing at that time. And Simmons is not playing again. And there's more drama with Ben Simmons in Brooklyn. I'm so over Ben Simmons. I don't even want to mention. He's like in that category with Carson Wentz where I'm almost willing to ban the use of their name on my shows. But like I said, I give him credit. But the Sixers team, let's talk the Sixers, not the Magic. Let's move on from him. Markelle Fultz. Sixers last night, again, it was a hard-fought game. Obviously, on Monday night, they had a huge lead, and they blew it. Yeah, all this talking, I haven't gotten through my first cup of coffee here yet. They blew that lead on Monday night. I'm going to use a Doc Rivers excuse, which I hate the excuse. I hate it. I hate it with a passion. But Doc Rivers used the excuse earlier in the year, so I'm going to use it for Monday. It was a scheduled loss. They got to an early lead. They were a little too hungover to play 4 full quarters. You saw them all at the NFC Championship game on the field with the players, in the private box with Michael Rubin. I guarantee some of those guys were out there partying with the Eagles after the game. I'm just gonna say it was a scheduled loss, a hungover loss. I partied too late on Sunday, loss on Monday. They came out last night. They took care of business. Joel Embiid continuing to dominate as he does. And, we haven't really even talked about the game and the performance he put up against the Denver Nuggets on Saturday in that rivalry game. He completely 120% dominated Nikolai Jokic. And hold on, I got to pull something up here on my phone here, or on my Twitter page here. Where's the tweet from yesterday? So the NBA, ESPN NBA power rankings. They bumped up the Sixers to 2. They dropped the Nuggets to 4. But their description on the NBA power rankings on the Denver Nuggets, in the middle of their little paragraph they wrote, they lost a game against the Sixers. It was a game that Joel Embiid took so personally that Denver shouldn't take the loss too hard. And that caught my eye yesterday. I don't even read the power rankings. I don't. But what I do is check in, on them from time to time. And seriously, ESPN had the gall to print something that said, let's not take a loss personally because the other team took it too personally. What? Are you crazy? Dude, if that was written about a Sixers team, we'd be if the Sixers would have lost Saturday, we'd be crushing them. But ESPN has the gall to print something saying, that's no big deal. And the Sixers took it really personally, and Joel Embiid really wanted to show up. Well, shouldn't have Nikolai Jokic wanted to show up? Prove that he's the MVP over Joel Embiid? You would think so. It just really rubbed me the wrong way because I think that was a bad piece of print there on ESPN's website. No need to print that phrase. That phrase just kind of, they're trying to invalidate how great of a game Joel Embiid had against Nikolai Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. Because that's what they had. They had a great game, and he played one of his best games of the year, one of the best games of his career. Great game. Now, regular season, it's meaningless. I know, blah, 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 whatever. But Jokic has gotten the MVPs. But what have they ever won? They haven't won anything either. So this high and mighty Denver Nuggets team, they're no different than the Sixers. They just have a guy that's won the MVP award twice over Joel Embiid. Anyway, to the Sixers game last night. Again, obviously, Joel Embiid played well. Yes. The thing I want to talk about and address, well, there's two things I want to talk about and address. And the first thing is the Tyrese Maxey off the bench. Now, I'm pulling up his last 10 games here on a side screen. And I said I was willing to give it time. And I think last night was 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it was his fourth or fifth game. Fourth or fifth game since he's been moved back to the bench. Fourth game. First two games he came out, the Brooklyn and the Denver game. He had really, actually no, the Sacramento. Did he play off the bench in the Sacramento game? I don't know. Let me click on this real quick. This will answer something real quick for me here. Did he come off the bench in the Sacramento game? No, he started the Sacramento game. All right, so backtrack. All right, so that means he's got 1, 2, 3, 4 games off the bench. First two games off the bench, Brooklyn and Denver. He didn't play bad. It's 27 and 13 points those two games. It was okay. But then the last two games against Orlando off the bench have not been good. And this is, addressing, Mark's question here, Maxey off the bench, yes or no? At first I was like, why are you going to put him on the bench? He's one of your most dynamic scorers, one of your most dynamic energy guys on this team. Why do you want, Tyrese Maxey coming off the bench? I'm like, you know what? The first two games he did okay. Let's settle in and see what he's got. And I know it's only been 2 more games, so it's only been a small sample size of 4 games. But those last 2 games against the Magic, I don't know if it was a bad matchup for him. I don't know if his heart's not into it coming off the bench. I don't know what it is, but I'm definitely back to wanting to question whether it's the right move. Now, he's still playing 25, well, 2 nights ago it was only 28 minutes, but he's still playing 30, 31 minutes a game. I get that. And that's fine. He's on the court most of, 2 of the 3 games at the end of the game. The game they, lost, they were trying to keep it close, and the last 3-4 minutes of the game, Maxey was on the bench. I'm okay with the role of the bench as long as Maxey's on the court the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game. And if he's not, I think it's all part of the rotation issue. But still, there's something. The last 2 games against Orlando versus the game against Brooklyn and Denver, the spark of him off the bench wasn't there. Now, I don't know if that's still him trying to adjust to this new role as a bench player, but he shot really poorly the last couple of nights. The energy level, the spark level wasn't there. And it got me thinking last night as I'm watching the game, and I'm watching him struggle off the bench. Look, there's just certain guys certain guys are bench players, and certain guys are starters. Because the mentality, it's kind of like a relief pitcher in baseball. If they're a closer, they only play they're a closer all the time. But certain guys that are in the 7th or 8th inning setup role can't come in the 9th inning and close a game because it's a different mentality. It's the same thing in basketball. Look, it's a totally different level of spectrum of talent, team, and everything else. But back during the process era, because we're not in the process era anymore, FYI. I don't believe that. We're in the new era for the Sixers. The process is over. Okay, once we got James Harden, the process ended at that point. Back in the beginning days when we had Dario Saric, the homie, who I loved him, great process player. But they tried rotating him as a starter and a bench guy. And you could see he was much better regulated to starting the game as a starter. But when you had him come off the bench, he couldn't get in the game flow. And that's kind of what I see the last 2 nights with Tyrese Maxey. Him struggling to get into the flow of the game coming off the bench. It's almost like mentally, even if he's not a focal point of the offense in the starting first 4 or 5 minutes, because you need to get Harden and Joel going in those first 4 or 5 minutes of the game. It seems like he can't come off that bench and find his groove right away, which is what he needs. If he's going to be a bench player, when his number's called in the first 4 or 5 minutes. Thanks for checking in, William. I appreciate it, man. We do this every single day, Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. You can watch it on replay. You can watch it live. Any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, drop them. I'll address anything. I appreciate you checking in, though. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, too. I really think that, mentally speaking, again, it's a small sample size, 4 games. And I don't think you quit on it yet. Maybe you give it till the All-Star break. I don't know. You give it 4, 5, 6 more games. But I'm not sure if Tyrese Maxey can mentally figure out yet how to come off the bench in that role. And because when you come off the bench in that role, you've got to be ready to go. There's no getting into the flow when you come off the bench. The game's already happening. You're 4 minutes left, 5 minutes left in the first quarter. You need to come off the bench and provide that spark. That's what bench players do. They provide that spark off the bench. And maybe that's just not his role. Maybe he's not capable of doing that. So then if he's not the guy to come off the bench, then what do you do? I mean, Tobias Harris has actually been helped by Maxey going to the bench. He gets involved in the game a little quicker. It's great that PJ Tucker's only playing 13 to 15 minutes a game. That's fine. I really think you go back to DeAnthony Melton back on the bench. He's proven he can make shots. He had a bad game last night. But, he's proven that he is a bench player. That is what he's used to role-wise. Maxey had an uneven game coming off the bench Monday. You know who had some good bench games off the bench? Matisse. We're going to address. That was my second point I wanted to bring up about the Sixers team. But you go with Melton off the bench. I think that's the smart move. You put Maxey back in the starting lineup. I'm willing to give it 3 or 4 more games, but I don't want Doc Rivers letting it last too long. Because then you're going to have to reintegrate Tyrese Maxey back in the starting lineup. All right, let's address this Matisse. This Matisse Thybulle is my other guy from last night that I want to address. My guy from the last 3 or 4 games that I want to address. All of a sudden, Doc Rivers is giving Matisse Thybulle some consistent minutes. Not a lot of minutes, but he's got a consistent set of minutes and a role. He's coming in at the end of the first quarter, last 2 or 3 minutes, and playing the first 2, 3, 4 minutes of the second quarter, depending on the game flow. About 4, 5, 6 minutes there. And doing the same thing third quarter into the fourth quarter. He's been playing about 10 to 13 minutes the last 3, 4, 5 games in a row. Guess what? All of a sudden, consistent playing time, knowing your role, knowing you're going to get out there. Guess what? Matisse is actually playing pretty good basketball right now. I mean, he's not putting up big numbers every night. He's taking shots when they're there. He's cutting the bed. The one thing Matisse has always been good at is movement on offense. He doesn't always make the shots, but he's the only Sixer player that consistently is running around the court, trying to cut, open up lanes, get the double team off of Joel, whatever it may be. Now, here's my thing, though. There's 2 different sides. Is Doc Rivers finally figuring it out with Matisse? Or are they trying to showcase him? Because there are a boatload of rumors starting to float as we get really close to the trade deadline, which, again, I think it's Tuesday, the trade deadline. It's either Tuesday or Wednesday. I forget. There's, a lot of rumors surrounding him. Now, are they trying to showcase Matisse to Sacramento, to Golden State? I heard a week or 2 ago, Dallas. There's a whole bunch of Western Conference teams that need defense, especially off their bench. They got plenty of scores on their team. Are they showcasing him? Mark's saying that they're probably showcasing him. Yeah, it's something that's stuck in my head that it's a very strong possibility that they are showcasing him, and that Matisse is not going to be here more than a couple more days. It's a very strong possibility. It's going to be a shame because Matisse is a guy that, is he going to be a star in the NBA? No, he's not. But he's definitely a guy that can play a very strong role on a playoff team. But you got to use him consistently. And we're seeing that the last few games, that when he gets that consistent playing time, that he has, the potential to be a contributor. It's not like he's a net negative on the court when he's consistently getting the playing time. And William saying showcase as well. Now, I'm actually concerned that depending on what they trade him for, Golden State, Sacramento are the 2 new most recent rumors. It's not like you're going to get a lot for him. You're going to get another back-end bench role piece. And you're going to lose your best perimeter defender probably. So DeAnthony Melton's a really good defender, and I do love DeAnthony Melton as a defender. And if Matisse gets traded, DeAnthony Melton has to go to the bench, in my opinion, because you need that defense coming off the bench in the crux of the game. Weird question or thought. If they trusted Do they still bring Tucker in? Well, that depends on whether Matisse is here. You know, everybody keeps telling me, William, that we're going to see the PJ Tucker and the value in PJ Tucker come playoff time. I don't see it. I think he's just a step slower, step behind. I mean, in the playoffs, the games get slower and it's a more half-court style, basketball game in the playoffs in those best-of-7 series. So maybe we see a little bit more from Tucker come playoff time. But I just don't know. The problem is if you do trade Matisse, who is going to be that guy? When you're going up against Milwaukee, and Sean Brace earlier in the show said, Chris Middleton back for Milwaukee. To me, Milwaukee and Boston are still huge threats to keeping the Sixers out of the second round or advancing past the second round. And you need somebody like Matisse that can guard a Tatum, a Jaylen Brown, a Giannis, or Chris Middleton. You need him. You trade him. Who's doing it? Anthony Melton's a little smaller, in my opinion. Not quite as long and quick and as Matisse is. But the problem is that the problem with Matisse is that he's a restricted free agent at the end of the season. If they're not going to bring him back, you kind of have to trade him, don't you? Matisse has Defensive Player of the Year skill. Yeah, I mean, I always thought that if Matisse could develop a shot like Robert Covington and become a true 3-and-D guy, that his defense was so much better than Robert Covington, that if he could have gotten a little bit of Robert Covington's offensive game, and I'm not saying Robert Covington was a great offensive player or anything like that, but he had a role on NBA teams, and he still does. Hell, maybe if we lose Matisse, I know Robert Covington's getting the DMP coach's decision a bunch of times in LA. Maybe we bring Robert Covington back, to replace Matisse. I don't know. We'll have to see with that. But I always agreed with you on this, Mark, that the Defensive Player of the Year skills were there. But the problem is he's never gotten consistent playing time. Oh, okay, I get what you're saying. I agree. Maybe they wouldn't have brought PJ Tucker in. Maybe. It's definitely there. I don't know. But you're starting to see it now with Matisse, the consistent playing time, what he's capable of. And I would have no problem whatsoever if Matisse was getting regularly 20 minutes a game. I think if you give him the confidence, you give him the vote of confidence, that if you have a bad game shooting, you're not going to lose your role. And that's the thing. Doc has always been a guy where, if Matisse has an 0 for 3 night shooting or turns down an open 3 because he's not feeling it, all of a sudden Doc benches him for 2 games and he's only seen it the last second of a quarter when you need a guy to play defense so the other team doesn't get a last second shot off. And that's been the problem with Matisse. Under Doc Rivers, I mean, for as much as Doc Rivers has helped contribute in the growth of Tyrese Maxey, he's also stunted the growth of Matisse Thybulle. And I think that's a big problem. The trade deadline's coming up. I think, I said it the other day on somebody else's show, that I would put the over-under at over 1.5 trades that Sixers make at this deadline. Unless there's one big, huge trade that has a lot of moving parts. I do think Matisse is getting showcased. And I think there's a strong chance that Matisse Thybulle gets traded. I think there's a strong chance Kirk Korkmaz and Jaden Springer get traded. There's a lot of talk of those two names because the Sixers are way over the luxury tax. They're hard capped. You're going to have to move a few guys to maybe save a penny. And I'm not trying to say the Sixers are a cheap team. They're not. For everything that Harris is, he's not cheap. And he doesn't care about spending the money. But it would help in the big picture of things to get rid of those contracts and save a little bit of room. And the Sixers need a backup big. There's that theory. Montrezl Harrell and Paul Reed, for as good as they are, they're small. You need a big. You need an Andre Drummond type. Saw Sean Bernard, Philadelphia Sports Network, put out an article with some of the names that they could bring in. And there's some good names out there. Mo Bamba's obviously going to be a popular name as the deadline gets traded as a backup big across the league. You need somebody that when Joel Embiid's not starting and that games when you go up against other big bigs, a Nikolai Jokic, that you have a guy that can body up those guys. And for the few good games that Montrezl Harrell's had, he's had just as many bad games. And we all know Doc doesn't like to play Paul Reed. And honestly, I love Paul Reed. Paul Reed, to me, falls into the Eagles' Paul Turner syndrome. The guy that flashes greatness in camp, in preseason games, and occasionally in a game, and everybody wants him to be a starter. But the guy's really not that overly talented. Maybe it's the same thing with Doc and him not developing Matisse. Maybe Doc not giving Paul Reed the opportunity to learn and grow on the fly has stunted the growth of Paul Reed, maybe. But I've seen no difference in Paul Reed's game this year than I did last year or the year before. He's still the same player. Guy that gets in foul trouble, makes mistakes. You know, he provides a spark, but he doesn't do anything really that well. And he's not that big. He's a small ball center. So they do need that. So they're probably going to move on from one or both of Furk and Jaden Springer. They're going to need to find a backup big. And there's a strong chance they trade Matisse. So there's 2 or 3 trades coming. But it's funny because I saw my memory on one of my Facebook memories today when I woke up was, every day this week, last year, we were talking about leading up to the trade deadline. Would the Sixers trade for James Harden? And the last 2 years, it's been all about, do we make this big, bold splash? Bradley Beal, James Harden, whoever it may be, to pair with Joel Embiid. This year's going to feel like a letdown. But this year's trade deadline is more important than last year's. Yes, we got James Harden last year, but we were going to make a big trade. We were going to get rid of Ben Simmons. There was going to be a big trade. We knew that. But this year, this is a year that the Sixers could and should get out of the Eastern Conference, at least get to the conference finals. But they need to make a tweak or two to the roster. And what Daryl Morey does, and Elton Brand doesn't even have a role, does to tweak this roster, it's important. That's going to be the difference between competing with the Bucks and the Celtics in the conference finals or the second round of the playoffs and not. What Daryl Morey does. So it'll be really interesting. And again, I can't wait to have Josh Reynolds on the show on Monday to talk a little bit more about this trade deadline and the Sixers team as we continue our trek to Super Bowl Sunday. I'm trying. Look, we haven't even talked about this week. The Phillies signed Josh Harrison to the bench. So we basically got Gregory Soto and Josh Harrison for Nick Maton and Matt Vierling. So anybody that hates that trade for Soto, get out of here. We haven't talked Phillies. Spring training is literally like 3 weeks away. We'll get back to that, but it's all Eagles as we go. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. If you're watching the show on replay, make sure you drop your comments. I will get back to them all. I always do. I want to shout out one final time my man Sean Brace. Love him. He's one of my favorite out there. I felt honored that he said yes, he would come on the show this morning. It was great to have him on to talk the betting aspect of the Super Bowl and all the different odds and stuff like that. Go smash that Hassan Reddick MVP at 35-1, guys. Before that number changed, everybody's talking about it. That number is going to come down to 25, 20-1 possibly, because everybody's jumping on that number. Go bet it now before that number changes. I promise you. It's a long shot, but it's a worthy long shot right there. I appreciate it. Everybody have a great day today. It is Thursday, tomorrow, Friday. Again, Brian Cameron, Philadelphia Sports Network. You join us to kick off the show tomorrow for about a half hour as we continue talk. Hit me up on Twitter at Beard and Knowledge. If you have questions, thoughts, topics you want addressed on this show, I'll get into them with Brian Cameron tomorrow as we continue this trek to the Super Bowl. Everybody have a great day, and go Birds.
And Philadelphia has it.